ton of rain and a tornado watch. So we're just staying on our toes. We're flip-flopping between everything.
Who should we call if you suddenly disappear, Haley?
You know what? We're just going to see where I show up next. It's going to pick me up and probably drop me in Chicago. How's it where y'all are at, Jane and Jen?
It is a cloudy day, but pretty warm, so I won't complain.
What's the hottest day y'all had so far?
Somewhere in the
80.
80s. Yeah.
Okay. I think we were 90 yesterday.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
oh yeah, it stays real warm here. Awesome. Well, we'll continue to let people trickle in, but would love to get started. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are tuning in from. I'm Haley Schofield, and I'm the VP of Business Development Engagement for orgSource. But it's my pleasure to get to welcome to this webinar today, how to get more from your marketing team without adding staff. I think this is an extremely important topic for everyone right now. And we will have Jane Pearson, our Vice President of Marketing Communication Services at orgSource, leading this, as well as Jennifer Proctor, our Operations Excellent Lead at orgSource. So if you go to the next slide, Jen, we'll go over just some housekeeping. Essentially, just a few things, a few announcements. All participants, if y'all want to stay on mute and then use the chat feature to submit questions, we'll definitely go over those at the end and engage with those as they come in. The presentation and link are going to be sent to you, so we'll send the recording to you probably tomorrow with contact information and everything. This webinar can be submitted for 0.5 CAE credits, so if that's something you're tracking, feel free to do so.
Haley's frozen. So,
Must be all that hot water out there.
yeah.
All right. So again,
Our
we're
new
deciding.
initiatives, something new that we have launched. We still got Jen on here. Next slide. Oh, losing me.
You're
You
good
might have
now.
lost me. Do you got me back?
Haley, we are losing you. You were frozen for a while and now, but are you seeing
Nope.
the screen?
Yeah, we gotta love the weather. Awesome. But wanted to quickly introduce you all our rug staff retreats. These are designed as highly focused working sessions that help association teams identify the real issues that are holding them back. So understand the root causes behind them and then commit to concrete actions before they leave the room. These retreats guide teams through a structured name it, reveal it, move it process using our heart powered leadership framework to create clarity. So if this is something that would be of interest to your team, feel free to reach out to me and I will drop a link in the chat as well for more information on it. And then next slide for me is the announcement of Solutions Day 2026. So if y'all have ever been to our Solutions Day, feel free to drop it in the chat. Would love to see who's attended in the past. But today is the official announcement of our date and location. So October 1st at the OLC Education and Conference Center in Rosemont, Illinois. So would love to have you all join. If you're not familiar with Solutions Day, it's really about not just theory, but high level ideas and a chance to learn what others are tackling and the challenges they're facing with technology and engagement and strategy in the association space. So you'll hear directly from association leaders and top partners in the space through a short form, real world case study environment. And so would love to have you all join us. And again, I'll drop that link. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. But other than that, I will pass it on to Jennifer and Jane and let them get started with their great presentation they have prepared for y'all today.
Thanks, Haley. We're excited. My colleague Jane and I are excited to be here today. Thanks for tuning in. Here's a few of the things that we're going to cover. What is the reality for CEOs in marketing, and what's the marketer's reality? Then we'll talk about where marketing teams can get stuck there, and then kind of the bottom line, the cost of staying stuck And then how do you get unstuck? That's the underscoring theme here. And then how do you bring your team along? That's what we'll be looking at today. So let's get started. First is the CEO's perspective on marketing. This is what we hear, Jane and I hear when we sit down with CEOs. A few things you'll notice as you read through these, it's almost never marketing isn't working. I can't tell if marketing's working. The frustration isn't with effort, it's with visibility, focus, and pace. If you've thought any of these, you're not alone and you're in the right place right now. So I hope give me a thumbs up in the comments or chats. Haley is monitoring those to see if these are things that you've ever thought heard from your organization's leaders. And then on the marketers side of things, it's the same organizations, but these are different seats at the table and a few things to notice. The marketers aren't lazy or disengaged. They're stretched, they're unclear, and they're reactive. Notice how the frustrations mirror the CEO quotes. The CEO says, I don't know what's working. And the marketer says, I'm guessing at what matters. It's the same gap, but they're different sides. They're asking for the same things: clarity, prioritization, and a strategy that they can execute against. This is our marketing maturity model, which can really help us diagnose and prescribe. It helps us meet teams where they are and chart a path forward. We've got 4 pillars. Those are those wedges in the middle. Strategy and alignment, which is making sure that marketing ties back to the organization's objectives and has executive buy-in. Audience and messaging, it's about talking about who we're talking to, what they care about, and how we frame the organization's value. Operations and workflows is the day-to-day marketing execution. That includes campaign cadence, handoffs between the teams, and approval paths. Who approves what? Which is a question that we come in and ask a lot as consultants. Last is the technology and data. That's the stack that supports all of this and how we measure what's working. That's the data part. So the maturity curve should look familiar because it's a common maturity curve when you're talking about anything. First is reactive. Second is developing. Third is establish. And fourth is leading. Most teams aren't uniformly at one stage, and that unevenness is where the friction lives. When CEOs say marketing isn't working, it's usually a symptom of one or more of the wedges in the circle not being aligned. Consider which wedge is strongest and which one might be dragging the rest down. That's the diagnosis that unlocks success without adding staff. Like anything, there's a cost of getting stuck in between some of those wedges and on your maturity model. When the structure breaks down, it damages things in 2 directions at once. Inside with your team and outside with what you're presenting to members. That's why it compounds so fast. When we look at this list of operational costs, you'll see chaotic workflows. How many of us have lived a fire drill and how much it costs? It costs us twice. Once in the hours spent scrambling, and then again in the strategic work that didn't happen. Think how many campaigns last quarter were planned versus reactive? If the answer is mostly reactive, that's not a staffing problem. That's a structure problem. Team burnout is another one that we hear about a lot. This is a hidden cost that leaders can really miss. Your best marketers don't complain, they leave. By the time you notice burnout, you've already lost institutional knowledge that you can't replace. And then you really do have a staffing problem, except now you're hiring and training from scratch instead of supporting the people who already knew your members. And then silos and lack of collaboration. Um, when product teams start doing their own marketing because they don't trust the marketing team's timeline, and now you have brand inconsistency and duplicated effort, nobody wins. Um, the product team is doing the work outside of their expertise, and the marketing team feels undermined. Lack of trust is going to slow everything down. This is the one that compounds the fastest. When leadership doesn't trust marketing's results, they add oversight. More oversight slows the team down. Slower results confirm the lack of trust, and it's a cycle that goes on and on and on. Breaking it requires someone to go first, to extend that trust maybe before it's even been earned. We'll talk about that a little bit. Let's get the other side, the member facing costs. Generic messaging is when members don't unsubscribe because you email them too much, they unsubscribe because nothing feels relevant to them. That's a segmentation and a strategy problem. It's not a volume problem. When every message goes to everyone, no message feels like it was meant for anyone. Inconsistent engagement is when members hear from you 3 times in 1 week and then nothing for 2 weeks. They lose the thread. Consistency isn't about frequency, it's about reliability. Members should know what to expect from you. Organizational relevance is really important, and it's an existential risk. If members can't articulate why they belong, renewal turns into a budget line item, and that one that can be cut easily. Every other cost on this slide feeds into this one. When the internal structure is broken, the external experience suffers, and eventually members stop seeing the value. If you're nodding along to any of 2 or 3 or 6 of these, on either side, your team isn't broken, it's stuck. And the good news is that stuck is fixable. Let's take a look. Handing it over to Jane.
So, if you come away with anything today, I would like to just advocate for giving your team a time to think. My very first boss, when I moved from operations into marketing, told me we are now paying you to think. With the job I had in operations, we were paying you to do. But now you need to spend 5% of your time on anything you do thinking through the strategy and talking about it with people. And then you're going to be spending 95% of your time executing. You're going to be going to street fairs and you're going to be spreading the word about our business. But 5% of that time is thinking time. So I want to share that with you. This is a 30-year-old piece of advice I got, maybe even more, but I won't admit it. But we're going to walk you through this today. But just know you don't have to fix everything at once. You don't have to go through all of those pillars at once. You just need to start figuring out where the breakdown is happening and where your team is in reactive or developing mode, because that's the easiest place to solve the problems because it's the foundation of the whole thing. And just making sure that the strategy of the organization is aligned with the marketing goals. Because if it's not, then the marketing team doesn't know what to do because everything else, the messaging, the workflows, the data are built on a shaky foundation. So that's the takeaway from today. Next slide, Jen, please. So this is our way of getting unstuck. Diagnosing before prescribing, because you have to really look at it. And most leaders are thinking that the team is stuck across the board, but they're not. There's almost always one pillar that's dragging everything else down. And until you find it, you're just guessing. So definitely take the time to diagnose. For step two, prioritize fixing operations. As we kind of brought up already, you can't have a functional marketing operation when the team is constantly in fire drill mode. For step three, work outward toward your members. Once your operational floor is stable, your team finally will have the bandwidth to work with intention instead of just keeping up. Because that's what a lot of the time marketers are doing. They're just trying to cross the things off the list and get on to the next one. And they're not taking that time to plan. They're also not taking that time to think about what worked and what didn't before they move on. Which email was a real success, which t-shirt was sold out at conference, whatever it is, just not taking that time and moving right on. So when Jen and I are called in to do, marketing assessments or fractional CMO work, we first have to get that operations in place. Like, okay, how are your projects coming in? Let's get your project management system. Let's look at, your email flows, things like that. And once we get through all the things that are kind of, well, like the theme today that are stuck, then we can dig into some real analysis. So one time we were really confused because we couldn't figure out why their emails had high open rates but low click-through rates. Really, this is strange. Well, we figured out that their subject lines were killing them. They were putting subject line in that sounded really appealing, but had absolutely nothing to do with the content of the email in terms of what the user thought they were getting. They were saying, 10 tips for better sales or something. And then you open it, it was just an invitation to the conference. And it was about a new session that was coming to the conference, but people thought they were going to get that information in the email. So they just went away. And then we looked at social media, we looked at their digital ads, and they had a really small budget and their ads should have been being managed very tightly. Instead, their ads were running 24 hours instead of during the time when their members would actually be looking at ads, because a lot of their members weren't looking at ads at 3 o'clock in the morning. We found out that they were being served on children's sites like Nickelodeon. They were going to iPads that kids were playing games on. Think about that for a second. You've got a tiny budget, and what the ads were being seen by people who couldn't buy them. It wasn't the member audience. So that's the kind of thing that once your team has time to look, they will find that there's room for improvement. Next slide, Jen.
So, in terms of the diagnose before prescribing, leaders who come to us sometimes have already decided what's wrong with their marketing. They'll say, we need better content, or we need to be on more channels, um, or we need more people. But sometimes they're right. And oftentimes those are symptoms. So the actual breakdown is somewhere upstream in the strategy or the workflow or the expectations placed on the team. And so if you prescribe before you diagnose, like anything, you'll solve the wrong problem. And what you'll really burn is trust in the process. Um, there's almost always a gap between what the leadership sees and what's actually happening. A CEO might see missed deadlines and inconsistent output, but the team is dealing with last minute requests and shifting priorities and no clear approval process. Back to those approval processes, which can really drag us all down. Um, Both are telling a story, but we're seeing different parts of the same broken system. So that's why this diagnose before prescribing is really important. And there's some things that can help this in this diagnosis. That diagnosis may look like interviewing each team member one-on-one and asking if you could change one thing about your work and how it gets to you, what would you do? It could be a starting point. How does work get to you? Does it get to you via Teams, Slack, email, text, phone? Does anybody use the phone anymore? But if it's all of the above, then you also have a challenge. That comes up a lot. Um, auditing marketing plans, that's what we would look for the marketing leader to be doing. What does a marketing plan look like? Is it aligned with the strategic goals of the organization? That's back to that wedge of matching your marketing with your strategy. Are the marketers clear on how that project connects to the overall strategy of the organization? Were they pre-approved and executed to plan, or um, a marketing plan, I think this is really important, is not the same as a promotional schedule or editorial calendar. Many teams have the latter, but they don't have that former. And that's where we see that they're executing without strategy. Another idea for a diagnosis might be pulling metrics that matter. That goes back to that data and tech wedge. Is marketing reporting and able to pull information on member acquisition, education sales, event attendees? Where are the gaps between the targets and the actuals? Do they have access to that? And one of the key questions, again, does marketing even have access to that data? A lot of times we see that they don't. They're disconnected from it. And can they get it? Um, where is it sitting, and is it in a system that marketing can't even reach? You might also think about mapping functions against headcount, what functions the team is responsible for, and compare it to who's on the team and what they're doing, and skill sets, and look for bottlenecks or unbalanced workloads, which could mean we need more staff, but it's often we need fewer responsibilities and we need to redistribute the work. The point of all of these is none of them require a new budget or a new hire. They require a leader who's willing to look honestly at the system before deciding what needs to be changed. That diagnosis itself, and I can't emphasize this enough, is a leadership act, and it signals to your team that you're taking this seriously and not just reacting to a complaint or a challenge that's been raised. Jane.
So, for the prioritize fixing operations, clarity precedes creativity. So, again, you're putting the structure in so they can think. And then you're trying to unlock their potential by, as Jen said, like mapping tasks to who's doing them operationally. So clearing that noise. But here are a few places to think about looking if you want to fix your marketing operations. One of my favorites is use or lack thereof of intake forms. Ask your team to track every incoming request for 2 weeks, who asked, when, what they wanted, and when it was due. And you'll start getting a picture of, how these projects are being generated, and are they coming in the normal door, or are they coming in, as Jen was just talking about, like all the different doors they possibly can. Look at the brief. This goes back to the marketing plan, in that campaigns should have a formal document that includes the audience, the objective, the key messages, the proof points, call to action. How do we know we're successful when we're done? And the brief should be a collaboration between the marketing team and the product owner. Sometimes people provide just enough information to the marketing team that they think that they need to get it up on the website or in an email, but really marketing should be involved in the strategy and the thought process behind whatever the initiative is, and again, how it connects to the strategy of the organization. Use of templates. So, when Jen and I do marketing engagements, we build templates for people. So every event doesn't need its own look. Every event doesn't need its own special email. Same thing with every program. Everything should be templated. Every product should have a list of features and benefits that the marketers just pull from. And we're going to talk about AI in a minute, but your AI can pull from too. there shouldn't be a reinvention with everything. It should be pretty formulaic unless it's truly a new initiative or something extremely exciting. They don't need the marketing team doesn't have time to reinvent the wheel, but a lot of the time they're not thinking about, hey, let's take a step back and do all this work to get to it where it's templated. That takes somebody sitting down and being like, do we have a messaging guide? Oh, we don't. Well, somebody's going to have to make one. AI makes it a lot easier to make that messaging guide, but it's still, you've got to take the time to do that. And the other thing is regularly scheduled touch points. Everybody has meetings to discuss projects. That's normal and expected. But having regular touch points with the product teams, I like to see if the organization is big enough to have pairings with product teams. So you've got the events marketing manager, the certification marketing manager, the membership marketing manager, and they work really close with those program teams instead of the whole team being a generalist. Then they can go to those team meetings and understand what's coming up and listen and hear how, an idea for something might be formed, because that'll help inform how they market it later on when, 6 months later when it becomes a thing, instead of having 6 months later the product team come to them and say, hey, we've got this new initiative. And the marketing team's like, oh, I heard about this in the staff meeting, but I didn't know it was coming to me so quickly. So just making sure the teams are aligned across the organization. If they aren't happening, then usually marketing is surprised, and surprised is part of the fire drill, right? And we don't want that. Next slide, Jen. So another easy way to look under the rocks is to look at the work product. If you have a lot of problems with work product, like the conference program's missing a sponsor, or the pricing is wrong, or there's a webinar that was marketed to the wrong people, or whatever it is, looking at that product and really holistically examining it, how is it designed? Does it look like the other things that are designed, or do we have some special sort of looks for different things that maybe make sense internally, but the member doesn't really know what to make of it? What photos are being used? Are they really helpful to get the message across? A lot of times we see conference photos that are basically the back of a bunch of people's heads. And as an example of something that doesn't add any value, read the emails and think about put yourself in the member's shoes. Look at your videos. Video is interesting because video is becoming more and more important, but it's becoming much less easy to produce. I mean, much more easy to produce. You don't need to take as much time as you used to do that, and it's taking much less budget. So think about that. And look at your website. What's the user experience on your website? A lot of the time when we do a website evaluation, we are able to identify 5 things that probably don't make any sense to the member, but for some reason somebody in the building thinks it's really important to have that on the homepage. And then, are they aligned with your strategy and your messaging documents and your brand, most importantly, so that your members can see your organization clearly and accurately and understand ultimately what the benefit of their association with you is. Next slide, Jen.
So we teased AI and we've been talking about it a lot across the orgSource brand. And of course, Kevin has been writing about it each week. But when I say AI can help your team do more without adding headcount, I really mean that. It's not a cost-cutting talking point, but it can be a genuine shift in what a 3 or 4 person marketing team can execute with intention. But intention is that bottom line word there. The organizations that will pull ahead in the next 2 or 3 years aren't necessarily the ones with the biggest budgets. They're the ones that get their structure right first. And this is where we go back to that structure wedge. AI will only magnify your structural problems if you don't address those first. Let I do what it's actually good at, but you have to get your ducks in a row to be able to really use it effectively. And then the other thing I'll just say is we were talking about making time for strategy, make time to experiment. with AI. A lot of folks are scared to use it, but once you start using it, start using different uh, tools, different AI tools, it can really help, and it can really help you solve the problems that you could be facing every day. Jane.
So here's some just I'm not going to read the slide, but these are just some ideas. You'll get them in the deck when you get the deck from us tomorrow. But as Jen said, it doesn't fix broken marketing. It'll just help you send the wrong message faster. AI will give you a tool that nobody has time to learn if your workflows are still chaotic. But once you get it in place, it can really help your team. It can be almost relaxing for your team because they can take that messaging guide and they can take that branding guide and they can give it to an AI agent and have it do any of the tasks that are listed here. And I didn't put it on the slide, but it's also great for sales enablement, helping your sales team understand which leads are the best and have the best outcomes. So faster segmentation. It used to take hours to pull lists and cross-reference the engagement data and build logic into your emails and all that. And now AI can do that so much faster, which means you'll get more relevant outreach to your members with the same number of staff, without, having to stress your staff out. It's great at generating first drafts, not final copy. Your team still needs to use their judgment and knowledge of your members to make sure their message is on point, but it definitely makes it faster. And you're also removing friction and adding capacity at the same time because, again, they'll have more time to think about what they're doing instead of just writing another email. One of the biggest drains on the small marketing team, which, a lot of associations have, is the mental load of keeping everything moving. What goes out when, to whom, following up on it. But AI assisted workflows and automation can really help with consistency so your team can focus on the work. It can tell them, what's overdue. They can reach out. They can actually reach out in some of the project management tools to understand, what's late or whatever, who's not responding. Better use of data. We've got member data in all of our AMS systems that we never look at, but AI can make it really accessible and, to the whole team, not just to the database people. And you can ask plain language questions and get real answers that you can use, like who's at risk of not renewing, who's unengaged. So those are just a few ideas, but as Jen said, I really recommend exploring it and experimenting with it. Just don't put personal data, don't put your data in an open AI. You got to have a closed AI that's proprietary. And if you ever want to talk about that with any of us, we are happy to help you with that. Next slide, Jen. So this is a big one. Every association marketing team is probably doing too much, and you can't fix that with just process. To get a handle on what's getting stuck, you have to sit down with your leadership team and say, let's have a hard discussion. Let's have a critical conversation here about what products or initiatives are past their prime, what products are at the end of a life cycle, what volunteer-led projects are no longer aligned with your goals. We all know those pet projects, and we've always done it this way. And, so and so, the last year's chair of the board just really loved this project, and they think it's a big deal, but we can't figure out how it fits in. Whenever we go into an organization, we like always uncover something that the staff just does because it's on the plan, but it's not driving revenue or member value, that it's, really not worth the staff time or investment, but it's sitting there on the plan. And so they do it. So asking those questions as a leadership team is really important. So I beg you, take something off the plate if you can. Next slide, Jen.
This is how you as organizational leaders can help bring the team along. We've walked you through a lot of things that you can do to get more from your marketing team, but it's a long list. But part of it is, how do you approach it? they've heard versions of this before and they've sat through initiatives, reorganizations, and some worked and some didn't, and some made things worse. So, why this slide matters is because when you walk into back into the office, when you after the session and you say, we're going to restructure marketing, your team will hear what we've been doing isn't good enough. And that's a natural reaction. We have to change management is part of everything we do. This is how you can really help bring the team along. People have been working hard, they've been under resourced and under supported. And so we say support them, don't surprise them. That framing matters enormously. We're in that you can say we're investing in better systems so you can focus on the work that matters. That lands a lot differently than we need to fix our marketing. Start by listening is if you remember that diagnose before prescribing that we talked about, that first step was to interview each team member one by one. That's not a diagnostic exercise. That's also it's not just a diagnostic exercise. It is also a change management move. When you ask someone, what would you change about the work you do? You're telling them that their perspective matters. They've been living with it, and now you're telling them that their experience is important. Um, Bringing them into the process, the changes that stick are the ones that the team helps design. If you hand down a new workflow or set up known priorities from the top, compliance is mandatory. But if your marketers help shape that process and co-create the templates and weigh in on what gets cut, those things that they stop doing, those are their changes and you get their buy-in. And then lastly, that pace the change. Don't try to overhaul strategy, operations, messaging, and technology all at once. That's a recipe for burnout and resentment. Pick a pillar that will create the most relief and that will get you the furthest. And usually operations is where it's going to start. That's from our take. And when a team sees that the first change actually made their lives easier, they may be ready for that next group. So everything that we've talked about today, uh, the strategy alignment, the operational fixes, the AI tools, none of it works if your team doesn't trust the process. And they won't trust the process if they feel it's happening to them rather than with them. That's why it matters. And that's why we have this slide in there. Where are you? Are you somewhere between developing strategy and established technology and data? That's normal. Go back to the getting unstuck slide, which is diagnose before prescribing, prioritize fixing operations, and work outward toward members. That's where you start. If you still aren't sure, we can help. We've worked with enough associations and nonprofits to know that the gap between perception and reality is usually where the real problem is. Everyone might think their messaging is fine, and then we look at the last 12 months of email performance and find out that only 60% of their list has been clicking on anything. That's not a criticism, that's just the starting point. So what we bring at orgSource is a combination of honest eyes and pattern recognition. We've seen enough teams to know what good looks like and what stuck looks like. And most importantly, how you go from one path, stuck, to another. Success. In practice, with real teams and real constraints and real budgets.
So, you came today, I think, thinking about your headcount, your budget, what you can't afford to do. I hope that we've shown you that the biggest gains aren't hiding in a new hire. They're hiding in the structure, the process, and the leadership approach, which you already control. So that's the good news. So align your strategy, fix the operational chaos, give your team the tools and the trust to work smarter. And when you bring these changes back to your organization, bring your team into the conversation. As Jen said, don't hand them a mandate. The question was never about, do we need more people? Do we need to hire? The question is, are we setting up the people that we already have to succeed? And now I hope we've helped you find the answer to that. All right, Haley, uh, do we have some questions?
Actually, I have one myself. So you just mentioned the answer isn't in a new hire. And I find this as a great concept. It sometimes lies already in your organization. So I guess what's the most common thing CEOs misdiagnose when they are thinking, talking about this with their marketing team and why it isn't performing? Like, what is their biggest misdiagnosis?
I think it goes to back to that strategy. We see a lot of marketing groups that aren't connected with the leadership at all. They're kind of kept away from that leadership communications. And so then it's not surprising that what they're putting out, that content that they're releasing, doesn't reflect the overall vision of the organization. So it's going back to that strategy wedge and making sure that your folks are connecting to it and drawing that through line. That's how then CEOs can really start to see their marketing and that messaging connect to the overall vision of the organization.
Can I also add that
Yeah.
this isn't exactly an answer to your question, but um, CEOs who connect with their marketers, like as part of their day, we're not in the office anymore, and CEOs are very busy. But I had an old CEO who, when we were reorganizing, we were moving to a new building, he actually put the marketing team outside of his office, not so he could keep an eye on us, but so that he could know what's going on because he could see what we were working on and he could see who was coming into the department, and it helped him feel more in touch with what the organization was doing. So just to add to that.
I love that. And so I guess from there, how do you help a CEO bring this message back to their marketing team without them feeling like it's criticism or, like they're not performing to the ability that they're expecting?
It starts with the conversations. They need to feel heard. They need to sit down and get that attention. Um, some of you might be familiar with the skip level meeting, where you talk to somebody who's not the immediate boss. So, that can really help make that connection too. If there's a director of marketing, you're not going around that director, you're talking to the director and being like, I want to talk to everybody on your team, talk to you. I've gotten your feedback. Now I want to talk to the graphic designer and I want to talk to the web content manager and really get an understanding of what their day to day is so that we can really think how we're going to bring the team to the next level.
Awesome. Jen, do you have anything to add?
I was just going to say, go back to that slide about how you bring people in. That change management part, and that is so important if you're using a new AMS or if you're revamping your marketing department. Either way, you have to be thoughtful about how you're working with the people because otherwise, it's just not going to work.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you all so much for leading us in this conversation and discussion. Everyone, thanks for joining. We will get a recording out to y'all. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their week.
Thanks, Haley.
Thanks, y'all.